This RealAg Radio podcast is brought to you by Focus Herbicide from FMC. When tank mixed with glyphosate, Focus Herbicide provides a complete solution. Burn off and extended control on key grassy and broadleaf weeds like wild oats, bromes, and kochia in lentils, wheat, and more. See your local retailer today.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Monday edition of the show. Hey, thanks so much for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. And, of course, a big shout-out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast. I hope you had yourself a great weekend, and we have a great show for you here today on this Monday, on Agronomic Monday. Peter Weepy Johnson will be with us before he hits the road for a number of speaking engagements this week. We're also going to hear from Daryl Domitruk. He's Executive Director with Manitoba Pulse and Soybean Growers. Kelvin Hepner had a chance to catch up with him at Crop Connect, and they're going to talk about research around root rot and aphanomyces and closing this gap on some of the challenges that we do have with root rot. We've also got some time today for the top ag news stories of the day. If you have any feedback on today's show, you can, of course, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can find us across all the different social media platforms, or you are more than welcome to call the RealAg feedback line. The number there is 855-776-6147. Back in the studios here in Lethbridge, Alberta, after a great week at the CFA meeting in Ottawa, Ontario last week, as well as the struggles of travel to try to get to Houston for Commodity Classic. Got there for 2 days. It was a great, great show. You know, the video that Bern Tobin did on that new four-wheel drive John Deere tractor, it's over like 20,000 views. Just like a lot of interest in that tractor, and of course a lot of opinions on that tractor, the size of the tractor, of course. So check that out at RealAgriculture.com or on our YouTube channel. Bern's got a great bunch of videos coming out of Commodity Classic. He was a busy man for 2 straight days. He needed the weekend off after all that walking around the big conference center there in Houston, Texas. Then on Saturday, we had the Vauxhall Baseball Academy had their banquet, and I've been emceeing the banquet for the past couple of years. And our special guest on Saturday night was North Battleford's own, North Battleford, Saskatchewan, Andrew Albers, former Major League pitcher, pitched a lot in the minor leagues, pitched in Korea, pitched in Japan, pitched in the Pan Am Games for Canada, 3 WBCs. Had a great career at the University of Kentucky. It was awesome. Andrew did a great job. Really talked about just how, just the adversity that he dealt with throughout his career, how he, as he described it, really overachieved with his baseball career based on his skill level and his perseverance. And of course, he had those 2 starts for the Twins where he pitched like 2 8-inning shutouts. It was crazy. And we showed some of the highlights of that. It was a great fireside chat, had so much fun, and the crowd really responded. It really identified that there's no just singular path to a goal. Of course, we always, especially in athletics, we think about, this is the path that you take to get where you want to be. Andrew is one of those guys that really proved that you can get to the highest level and take a path that maybe some don't expect you to whatsoever. So that was a great night with the Vauxhall Baseball Academy in Vauxhall, Alberta. A lot of fun. We raised a lot of money. Cool. Live auction was hot. It was a lot of fun. Okay, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to get started with Agronomic Monday. Peter Weepy Johnson standing by. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Special treat today. We have a live audience, as you've heard. We are at the Canadian Federation of Agriculture meeting in Ottawa, Ontario. Today's show is brought to you by MNP. So as Canada's chief trade negotiator, Steve Rahul was responsible for negotiating the new NAFTA agreement, the USMCA. In Canada, we call it the CUSMA. We're going to have a renegotiation in 2026 of the CUSMA agreement.
On July 1st, 2026, Canada, the U.S., and Mexico are going to have to confirm in writing that they want the agreement to continue. And if that just happens without much else going on, then we're full steam ahead. If one of those countries decides they're not going to formally commit to the continuation, then we're into a world of uncertainty because the agreement will be in a state of having to be reviewed every year on an ongoing basis until something changes or it expires in 10 years. But I think beyond that, there's an expectation that as we lead up to July 1st, 2026, the U.S. in particular will start pushing for some kind of change. So there could be a negotiation that develops, and there could be a forward work plan coming out of that.
Have you heard of Vantage Ag? They're a manufacturer and distributor of liquid fertilizers, and they want to work with you. They want to learn more about you and your goals and build a relationship centered around high-value products and a customized approach. For more information on Vantage Ag, call Paul Sinkovich at 778-919-3370 or visit vantage.ag to get started today.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Monday. It's Agronomic Monday, of course. We've got lots of stuff to discuss with Peter Repeat Johnson. This segment is brought to you by Excite. Excite your crops with inputs from Excite Bio. Access nitrogen and phosphorus with Excite Bio's lineup of inoculants and ag biologicals. Since 2010, they've been helping farmers harness the power of the soil. Learn more at excitebio.ca. That's XITEBIO.ca. I mentioned Peter Repeat Johnson. Let's bring him in. Hey, Pete, how's it going?
It's going awesome, Shaun. And you talk about excite. How could you not be excited being in agriculture these days? Because the weather is just bizarre. It's crazy warm. It almost feels like early May today rather than early March here in Ontario. And I don't know. It's just there's so many cool things happening out there. I know you just got back from Commodity Classic, and someday I have to get there. But watching the Twitter discussions from Commodity Classic sounds like there was lots of cool stuff there and a real uplifting meeting as well. So how can you not be excited to be in agriculture?
Yeah, it definitely was a good meeting. They had record attendance for sure. Obviously, there were some big unveils, like John, especially at John Deere. That tractor, 830 horsepower. We just keep on. I remember when 550 was big. Like, I'm not that old. Like 550 was like, oh, that's a big tractor. Now we've blown by that.
Shaun, I remember when 120 horsepower was big. So that just like all things are relative. But I
thought you were going to say I remember when a horsepower actually was a horse.
Ouch. No, I'm not quite that old, okay? Although working with the Mennonites, in that case, sometimes a horsepower still is a horse.
Yeah.
We still have a bit of that. But
True.
I was actually a little bit more excited with their air seeder and some of the new additions that they've come out with on the new air seeder, like the on-the-go calibration, and just like there's a whole bunch of things there that they needed to do, individual tank weigh scales and better seed delivery and individual section or tower controls. So just I don't know. Yeah, 830 horsepower is fun, but that's just more testosterone tillage, man. Let the black smoke pour. I'm more interested in let's do a good job getting the right seeding rate into the ground placed properly. So actually, the air seeder was more fun for me than the tractor.
Yeah, well, like you said, it was a very good meeting. I would say that overall there definitely was some concern about where the margins are here, and there's a lot of, especially in the Corn Belt, there's a lot, and in Canada, even on some of the other crops, farmers undersold, relatively speaking, and
wheat peak too.
Yeah, well,
wheat
yeah,
peak too.
I think there's let's be honest, there's a lot of people out there, and that's not being critical. That's just where we are. But in hindsight, and I remember I interviewed Matt Bennett from agmarket.net last week, and one of the things that I remember, this quote stuck with me. Matt said, if you're selling 23 corn today, you're in the red. you're losing money, right? So
Yeah.
that's some of the realities. And so we got to do a good job in the field because things aren't as lofty as they once were. Hey, before we get into the agronomics, Pete, I know this time of year you're busy on the play scene. How's that going?
Yeah, so our next play opens at Thistle Theater in Embro on March the 15th, and it's the Bob Hayward story. So Bob Hayward, of course, and Miss Super Test 3, the hydroplane that won the world championship 3 years running. And then unfortunately Bob was killed in an accident in Miss Super Test 2 after that. So it's the Bob Hayward story, first time it's ever been told, a world premiere, if you will, of a chicken farmer. Bob Hayward was a chicken farmer from Embro. And so I think that's why Thistle Theater is doing it. We're Embro based. And yeah, by the way, tickets going really quickly. So if people want to come see it, they should go to the Thistle Theater website and get their ticket.
Now, you mentioned the weather's great. I don't know. Speak for yourself, dude. Winter is on the prairies. There's no question about that. We're back into a bit of a cold. It is a little bit warmer here today than it was on the weekend, but snow falling, roads terrible. It's I think March here for the prairies we're kind of in like a lion, and which would make sense because it's pretty dry, so we were feeling we're gonna have a pretty early spring. So out like a lamb would definitely make sense. So Eastern Canada, the opposite of that.
100%. And by the way, Shaun, we had wicked snow on Wednesday night, but it was just a blip. And then by Thursday noon, that snow was pretty much gone. Most areas, maybe not as you went further north. And the weekend was incredible temperatures. And depending on where you're at in Ontario today, it's just kind of in that 16 degrees Celsius range. And the wheat is breaking dormancy. The maple sap run is going to be over very shortly, if it's not already over. Certainly in the southern part of the province, the maples are breaking bud, and once they do that, then the sap is too dark, and they just have to quit pulling it. So yeah, we're super early, and all sorts of questions around what do we do from a crop management standpoint when we are super early like that. And by the way, Shaun, I would suggest that, yeah, you're back. Like March came in like a lion, for us in like a lamb. I hope it doesn't mean that it goes out like a lion for us, because I wouldn't look forward to that. But I think you had some opportunities before this snow started when you're super dry in February. Growers should have been in the field, and I know the odd one was, but I think that's pretty rare. And I just kind of scratch my head and say, like, why not? Why were we not out there doing more in the field?
Haven't done it before.
Oh,
There's
come on,
probably
Shaun.
a lot of reasons. But...
Shaun, what are the most dangerous words in agriculture?
Oh, I don't know. There's a lot of them. Go faster.
Yeah, no. So the most dangerous words in agriculture are,
because we always have.
We have always done it this way. Absolutely. And I know I'm not supposed to put you on the spot with questions like that, but
That's my job.
Just because you haven't seeded spring wheat in February before doesn't mean in Alberta you should have been seeding, because the soil was dry. And actually, we have had growers in February plant oats, both as a cover crop and also for grain, in dry soil in February. And I mean, that's really weird for Ontario to be dry soil in February. Mostly I talk about frost seeding. This year they got away, without even having to punch it through the frost. And I will almost guarantee that those oats that got planted in February will be the best oats ever, because they're into the right time frame from a growth standpoint. They'll miss the heat.
Yeah, don't plant your corn, don't plant your soybeans, don't plant your canola, but you can go out there and plant your wheat. There's no
or your barley or your oats, right?
Yeah, you had a question from a listener in North Dakota about this too.
Well, actually, the question from North Dakota wasn't around that. It was around pH and change at depth, right?
Oh,
so
sorry.
It's all good. Like that and a really interesting question. So he said that his surface soil was a pH of 5.4. And from 10 to 36 inches, his pH was 6.8, right? And so 5.4 is too low, and 6.8 is good. So he was being told that he needed to apply 25% more nitrogen because his surface soil was pH of 5.4, and that his nitrogen use efficiency would drop because of that low pH. And his question was, well, won't that nitrogen and sulfur leach down below the low pH surface soil and get into the 6-8, and my plants will pick it up from there? And why would I put on 25% more nitrogen? And my answer is no, don't. Like 25% more nitrogen, all you're doing is acidifying that surface soil that much more. And so the Montana state data is really clear. If you put on 100 pounds more nitrogen than you need, you on average reduce your pH by 0.1 units. So if he adds 25% more nitrogen, he's still going to get a poor crop because he's at 5.4 pH. It's not going to leach down into the subsoil almost for sure unless you get way more moisture than you normally do. So all I've done is taken the 5.4 to a 5.3. Next year I'll take it to a 5.2. The year after that I'll take it to a 5.1. Like, don't do that. The answer is that you really have to lime, or you have to quit putting on too much nitrogen. You have to manage your nitrogen better. And so when you say from an economic standpoint, like, absolutely, we have to manage that nitrogen better around that and just do a better job.
And lime's expensive, right?
Lime is incredibly expensive, particularly in Western Canada and the U.S. Midwest. Here in Ontario, it's not so bad because we have lots of lime kilns very, like, in the province. We're based on limestone, so our trucking cost doesn't kill us. Part of the problem, of course, is that typically you have to add at least 1 ton per acre, perhaps even as much as 2.5 tons per acre.
It's a lot of volume.
It's a lot of volume, and it's a lot of trucks if trucking is a big part of that expense. And it's also, it's fairly cheap per ton, but you just have to put on enough tons. So it could easily add up to $200 an acre. But the challenge really is, how else do you deal with that? And the answer is you can grow more low pH tolerant crops, but that doesn't solve the issue long term. The only way to solve the issue long term is lime.
Okay, so a lot of times we talk about depth of soil test for nutrients. When we talk about saying the pH of my soil is, what depths are we doing that at?
So typically most of North America, that's a 0 to 6 inch sample.
Okay.
And the reason that it's 0 to 6 inch is that for most crops, 80% of the root growth is in that 0 to 6 inch zone. Now, it depends on moisture and what the subsoil is made up of and many things like that. But that's predominantly, and even if the roots get 3 feet deep in the soil where the pH is okay, when that seed first germinates and those roots start growing, they're in that top 6 inches, and they don't grow good roots at low pH. And if you don't grow good roots in the early stages of the crop, you just negatively impact your yield potential.
All this discussion about pH is reminding me I got to check my hot tub. Better take the cover off and see what's growing in there.
Yeah.
Oh, man. The answer to your above-ground nitrogen loss problem is Anvil, nitrogen stabilizer from Koch Agronomic Services. To learn how Anvil's dual-action ingredients deliver extended protection, visit kochag.ca. We've got more coming up with Peter Wheat Johnson. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
There's power, and then there's superpower. Advancing the unstoppable superpower of pre-seed from New Farm. Take control, eliminate weed competition, and start clean in spring. Manage weeds early in canola, cereals, and pulses. Conquer, Goldwing, Thunderhawk, and Blackhawk EVO. Convenient formulations and multiple modes of action. Add more power to glyphosate, more benefits to your burn down. Go to newfarm.ca/burndown.
If you have a growing list of questions about getting more from your fields, know that Koch Agronomic Services has an answer for every acre. With a full spectrum of nutrient management, nutrient protection, and seed enhancement options, Koch Agronomic Services offers a deep portfolio of agronomically effective products. Each designed to enhance yield potential, all available to help solve your problems. Find the answer that's right for your acres. Start by visiting kochag.ca. That's KOCH ag.ca.
At Vatterstad, we aim to be the world's leading partner for outstanding emergence. We're doing that through innovative tillage, planting, and seeding equipment that's optimized for your field conditions and soil types. We also offer industry-leading capacities to help you get the job done in shorter windows of time. It's all designed to give your crop the best start possible so you can maximize yields. Vatterstad, we look forward to growing together.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Monday. Shaun Haney, your host, joined by Peter Pete Johnson, the one, the only. Is that usually how you're introduced, Pete, the one, the only?
Yeah, no, it's just I'm just Wheat Pete. Stop there, okay?
Oh, okay. Well, if you're dealing with uncertainties on your farm, managing risk should not be one of them. MMP's ag team specializes in risk management. Visit mmp.ca to learn how you can stay ahead of the game and plan for the unknown. Go to mmp.ca. Pete, I have a question for you coming off of Commodity Classic. Talking to a number of farmers and companies in the fertilizer market, a question was posed to me that I do not know the answer to, but I know that you would. So I saved it. I texted myself. I said, I got to ask Pete about this. It has to do with dry versus liquid fertilizer. And somebody had asked me, why aren't more Canadians using liquid fertilizer? And I switched it around and said, why are so many Americans using liquid fertilizer? I know you'll know the ins and outs of this, so let's discuss this. Why are we not seeing more liquid fertilizer in Canada?
So we don't see more liquid fertilizer in Canada, partially because we're a little bit smaller operations. Not that we don't have big operations, we absolutely do. But liquid fertilizer, the real win with liquid fertilizer, well, I guess there's two wins. One is field efficiency. So oftentimes I can have a liquid tank. I don't have to drag behind me a big air cart to blow the fertilizer down in a starter fertilizer program or in a strip till fertilizer program. I'm faster in the field. And if you've got many thousands of acres to cover, that downtime that it takes to fill with dry fertilizer, and it just slows the process down, it hurts your field efficiency too much. When we get to Canada, I mean, at the end of the day, we know that we need that starter fertilizer. And so we've been a big push to put a bigger starter fertilizer program together, which if you do it with liquid, because liquid typically is more expensive. I mean, the fertilizer starts out as dry, and if you're going to make a liquid fertilizer, you have to have heated tanks, and you have to, you're often doing different mixtures, whereas, you buy MAP, it's 1152.0. You buy potash, it's 0060 or 0062, and it's a far more commoditized process with less handling. And so typically dry fertilizer is about half the cost of liquid per pound of nutrient. And so when you're putting on big volumes and you're trying to build soil test, or you're trying to maximize that fertilizer response, you can put more nutrients with dry at the same cost, or even a lower cost, and you get more plant response. And so the agronomy pushes you to dry. The field efficiency pushes you towards liquid. And so even with air carts, Ontario in particular, growers know that yield boost they can get out of those higher nutrient inputs at planting time, or at the time when they do the strip till, that they pay. And so they're staying the course. I have large growers who still pull an air cart behind the planter, or they're still pulling an air cart behind the strip till unit with the dry fertilizer. And the other problem with liquid is that typically we don't replace all the nutrients that we take off, because it's just pricey to do that. So then somewhere in that program, you have to still go across the field and apply dry fertilizer to maintain your soil test levels. So you got to find an out-of-season time to do that. And when you go into the United States, they often have time in the fall, because they've got a bit longer season on, certainly when you get into the I states, they're
Yeah.
A little bit drier in the fall. The corn comes off earlier. In fact, they often take the corn off before the soybeans, and they just can go out there and they can apply those nutrients as dry. And then next spring, field efficiency works again. Here in Canada, our season isn't quite as long, and so we have less opportunity to do the dry replacement, the dry bump back up, right?
Yeah, but at the same time, so it really kind of it's really about your operation, what you're looking for, because we do have a lot of
Large growers
farms in Canada that are passionate about liquid. I remember going back to, I think it was a corn school. I'm pretty sure it was a corn school we did. This is going way back. This is going way back in time, Pete. You and I both had more hair at the time, and Greg Stewart, okay, did a video, and I think it was like about it was like starter fertilizer, liquid versus dry, or something like that. Man, people are still commenting on that video all these years and passionate about it. It's almost like a tires versus tracks kind of, tires versus tracks kind of conversation.
Yep, absolutely. And again, so if you're liquid, you can place it right with the seed much more easily than dry.
Launch it out of the ground.
Right, exactly. So that's a benefit. And because it's liquid and we're using pumps, we can get the rate really low. We go to dry fertilizer, it's much harder to get a low enough rate right with the seed. So typically there we're either mid-row banding or we're double shooting on an air drill out west, right? So the fertilizer's to one side, the seed's to the other side. Or with corn, we're in a 2x2 band. So to go to a 2x2 band, now I need another set of disc openers to put that dry fertilizer in the ground. So that's more upkeep. But if you look at the data, and Greg would probably have said that the dry fertilizer brought more to the table, because in our data set, if you look at 5 gallons of a liquid, we get a good yield benefit from that, but it's less than when I go to a dry 2x2 program, because I just don't bring as many nutrients to the table. And so nowadays, some guys will actually go liquid right on the seed and then still have the 2x2 band, and they call that kind of relay fertilization. So they get the boost out of the ground, and then when the roots hit the 2x2 band, it keeps that plant growing. And sometimes that can be a 7 to a 10 bushel yield increase, but not all the time. So it's just,
Okay. And some of this does also come down to which crops. Like you gotta ask yourself, you gotta be a smart agronomist and ask yourself which fert on which crops.
Yeah, it's a really good comment, Shaun. And one of the things that growers have been really challenged with this spring is the tight economics, right? You mentioned that if you're selling old crop corn today, that you're losing money, you're in the red, and growers are looking at their 24 crop and saying, where can I cut back? And what's really interesting is that it's sort of the exact opposite of what I was taught when I went to university. When I went to university, I was taught soybeans take massive amounts of potash off the field when you harvest the crop. They need lots of potash, put potash on. Corn, it needs lots of phosphorus. It takes phosphorus off the field. You got to put phosphorus on corn. If you have a low potash soil test, you can put on all the phosphorus you want, and you're wasting your money. Potash is actually more impactful on corn than phosphorus. And so if you have a low soil test, you better get some potash there, because not only will it increase your yield more than the phosphorus will, but it will improve your nitrogen use efficiency as well. You'll need less nitrogen to get that higher yield. And so as growers look at that economics, and they're saying, well, I'm going to cut back my fertility because that's an expense I can manage. Well, if you've got good soil tests, the answer is a little bit of liquid on the seed, you can live with that. Or a low rate of a dry 2x2 starter, or even a low rate of broadcast on soybeans, you can live with that, or even a 0 on soybeans. But if you are in those low soil test categories, potash is critical on corn, phosphorus is critical on soybeans, not potash the way we thought. They're more responsive to phosphorus than they are to potash at low soil tests. With wheat, it's all about phosphorus. I've always said with wheat, and you look at getting that crop off to a good start, there are 3 things that matter. It's called phosphorus, phosphorus, and phosphorus. So wheat is phosphorus, but with barley, Potash actually gets to be a little bit more important. So wheat, you walk away from potash for the most part, unless you're super dry. If you're super dry, then the potash gets unavailable. It gets tied up in the clay. So super dry soils, you still look at maybe 10 pounds of potash. But barley, it responds better to potash. And with canola, it's phosphorus again. So knowing what nutrient is critical to your crop and doing the soil test so you know where you start off with all those nutrients, those can really help you shave back your fertilizer costs on a tight year and not give up yield. Long term, you still have to maintain those soil tests, but on a tight year, you can manage around it.
Hey, we're almost out of time here, but I do want to hit on the question you've been getting a lot. You curled all week in the Farmers Bonspiel in your area. We won't ask how poorly you did because I've heard you are you may be good at wheat agronomy. The curling may be a little bit less of an expert. But one of the big questions you were getting at the pub after you got off the sheet of ice was, when do I fertilize my wheat? What'd you tell them?
And a really great question. So first off, if you look at the wheat crop has broken dormancy or is breaking dormancy here in Ontario, but the demand, the nutrient demand in that early growth stage is almost zero. And so if you fertilize, we've already had some growers put fertilizer on their wheat crop. The risk of loss, if it comes in wet, of nitrogen is high. The potential reward is low. And so when I'm in a high risk, low reward situation, I'm saying put the brakes on. Let's let the crop break dormancy. Let's get till mid-March and see what the weather still is. If it's still going strong, then we'll need to put the first application on. But for goodness sakes, do not put all of the nitrogen needs on for that crop, because if April turns wet, we will, and 2012 we saw exactly that. Early spring, all the nitrogen on, wet late April, and we lost too much nitrogen. So you if you're going to do early, you must split, and you want to keep the amount of nitrogen really quite low in that first application.
Yeah. Hey, what do you got on this week? You were busy last week. What are you doing this week?
Yeah, so Shaun, this week is still fairly busy. I'm speaking in Mount Forest on Monday. Tuesday is my catch-up day. Then, of course, Wednesday is the word. Thursday, we go to Idaho Falls, Idaho, and we're speaking to the Idaho wheat growers out there. They had me there last year, and they wanted me back. So there you go, Shaun. That's a lot of flying, but it's the way it works.
I've driven through Idaho Falls several times. Yep.
It'd be a long drive for me, Shaun. I'm flying.
Well, it's a long drive for me too. I didn't say it was I was going there this afternoon, but I will be through there next weekend.
Cool.
Actually. Yep. Just comparing notes, I'm speaking to the Crop Management Network in Camrose on Tuesday and the Alberta Sugar Beet Growers on Wednesday. So
that would be a ton of fun. It was a ton of fun for me to speak to the potato growers last week here in Ontario, because that's not my typical audience. And we talked about soil health. And
were you trying to convince them that wheat is a more profitable crop to grow than potatoes?
No.
Okay, good.
I know better than that. But I was trying to convince them that they should use wheat in their rotation with potatoes, because they would have healthier soil. They could do cover crops, and they'd have more potatoes and more profit at the end of it all.
Love it. This segment was brought to you by the new Oxbow cereal broadleaf herbicide from New Farm. Oxbow is powered by Duplasm technology that is a workhorse on resistant kochia and other tough weeds in your wheat and barley. Pete, thanks so much for joining us here this week on Agronomic Monday.
Yeah, always fun, Shaun. Have yourself a great week and drive careful, okay?
Will do. We'll be right back on RealAg Radio right after this.
If I asked you, what's the most important tool on your farm, you'd probably think of tractors, trucks, and implements first. But it's actually something much bigger than that. Your soil is the most important equipment you own. The real question is, are you doing enough to keep it running at peak performance? Nutrien Smart Nutrition MAP plus MST is engineered with patented micronized sulfur technology to refuel your soil for maximum yields. Learn how to tune up your soil at smartnutritionmst.com.
CDC Endure is a new oat line from Alliance Seed. High yielding with excellent disease resistance and the quality end users ask for, all in one great oat variety. CDC Endure provides the high beta-glucan levels to make heart-healthy products like breakfast cereals. For more information on CDC Endure oats, as well as any other products from Alliance Seed, check out allianceseed.com or visit any Alliance Seed authorized retailers.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Agronomic Monday. For balanced nutrition with micronutrients, the best answer is Wolftrax DDP from Koch Agronomic Services. To learn how Wolftrax can ensure nutrient availability through a crop's growth cycle, visit kochag.ca. We're going to talk now about a real threat to the pulse acre in Western Canada and, quite frankly, the northern tier of the United States. Where there are pulse acres, there is concern about root rot. Aphanomyces comes up lots with growers, and some of you have probably backed off some of your pulse in the rotation because of the threat of root rot. Well, on a recent Pulse School, Kelvin Hepner happened to check in on where are we going with some of the research related to root rot and aphanomyces, and what can be done to find a solution to this real threat to the pulse acre. And Kelvin had a chance to catch up with Executive Director with Manitoba Pulse and Soybean Growers. It was Daryl Domitruk, and they chatted at Crop Connect back a couple weeks ago. Of course, the Pulse School is brought to you by BSF Canada. You can find more episodes by going to pulseschool.com. Let's hear what Daryl had to say.
For Real Agriculture, I'm Kelvin Hepner at Crop Connect, and we are talking about root rots in pulse crops and where things are headed on the research front. We're joined by Daryl Domitruk, Executive Director with Manitoba Pulse and Soybean Growers. And Daryl, we have recently seen announcement of the new Pulse Research Cluster under the new Sustainable Canadian Ag Partnership, the new 5-year FedProv framework. Where are things at in terms of advancing research in root rot? Of course, aphanomyces is top of mind for a lot of growers.
Over the last few 5-year programs, as you mentioned, the latest one being SCAP, root rot has more and more come to the center of those programs. It's a significant risk to pulse crop production across the country, and we're certainly seeing it here in Manitoba and on the prairies, most prominently with aphanomyces and that pathogen's infection of pea roots. And so there's a considerable effort being mounted in this current science cluster to address aphanomyces, both by figuring out its biology and by figuring out its genetics, and then thirdly by figuring out how its biology and genetics interact with the biology and genetics of the pea plant. So aphanomyces is a focus, but another focus that we're working on is a broader set of root rot pathogens, including fusarium. So a lot of people, they hear the word fusarium and think of fusarium head blight in wheat. In fact, the fusarium family of pathogens is very large, and they occupy the soil and create disease problems for the roots of beans, dry beans, and peas. And so in addition to a lot of aphanomyces work, we've got parallel work going on in a broader suite of pathogens, including aphanomyces. In those projects, we're connected in with federal and university labs stretching from Lethbridge to Guelph, and including work at Brandon and Morden. And so that's a key for us. We're part of a national effort on root rot. In fact, the 3 prairie provinces, the pulse groups there, have come together as a unified group to address root rot by co-investing in projects, and the science clusters is one area, but we're doing other things as well. It's quite a serious disease that we actually don't have a lot of solutions for right now. So we're working on the genetic front and the plant breeding front, but also on the agronomy front. We really don't know how many years you need to have between pea crops in Manitoba to prevent aphanomyces. We have an idea that it might be 8 years, but we're doing tests with the agronomist in residence program at the University of Manitoba to try and figure that out, and it's all linked into a very comprehensive focus on root rot.
Okay. You are also doing some work, of course, across the border in other areas with researchers at NDSU, for example. Is there some of that cooperation happening on the root rot front as well?
There will be, and certainly at the scientific level, scientists collaborate all around the world. So knowledge on genetics especially is shared. But when we come to putting those genetic knowledge to work actually on farms, we obviously share real estate with places like North Dakota and Minnesota. So we intend to forge relationships to the south of us, particularly with respect to dry beans and how root rot might affect dry beans. We've got a good collaboration west with our prairie cousins, and growing collaborations east with our fellow bean growers in Ontario. So now we're working to move south a bit, and together, this is what it's going to take. It's going to take some significant collaboration and some of the best scientific minds to figure this one out.
Yeah, and like you said, there's multiple steps to this chain that we don't have answers for. So there kind of needs to be that overview of somebody's a scientist somewhere, or somebody in your position maybe, that decides how do we prioritize research and how does where do we head with all these different pieces.
Indeed, a good example of that is that the existing resistance to aphanomyces is only partial resistance. So we don't foresee in the near future strong resistance. So in other words, we're going to have to rely on management, agronomy, and a bit of luck. And so while the geneticists are working on partial resistance and eventually full resistance, we have other folks working on the agronomy part and the soil science part and the management of soil water. And then we've got, hopefully some people working on the luck as well.
The luck, yeah. That's a tough one. Anything else then on root rot and where this project is headed in the next? It would be the next 4 years, I guess. We're almost till the first full year of the SCAP program already having gone behind us.
Yeah, we're hopeful we're going to see results from these projects, but it is a sort of behind the scenes kind of work for the time being, and so we're focusing at MPSG a lot on surveillance. So while scientists are working in their labs, you'll see MPSG agronomists around fields in Manitoba taking samples of soil, taking samples of plants, and collaborating with folks at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada and the university just to track the extent of root rot, particularly aphanomyces, and just to keep a handle on that and to take notes on what kind of agronomic practices might be beneficial to managing this disease going forward.
Yeah. And farmers can, of course, participate in all of that surveillance as well.
Absolutely. In fact, it's required for it to happen. So every year we seek out growers that are curious about what root pathogens might be in their field, and we use biosecurity measures and enter fields and take samples. And this is for peas as well as soybeans, in fact. So we do a lot of that work in the summer and look to collaborate with any interested producer.
Väderstad is partnering with Canadian farmers for outstanding emergence. Their line of tillage, seeding, and planting equipment offers solutions for all soil types, field conditions, and tillage practices, helping you to maximize yield. To learn more and find your local dealer, visit Väderstad.com. We'll be right back with more of RealAg Radio. We got the top ag news stories of the day coming up right after this. Get all the information you need to keep your pulse crop healthy and profitable with the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School is a free YouTube video series covering agronomy, research, and more across a host of different pulse crops. It's also available as an audio podcast wherever you download or stream your favorite podcast. Check us out on YouTube or visit RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School, brought to you by BSF Canada.
What's next for your fields? At Pioneer, delivering industry-leading genetics drives everything we do. From the scientists in the lab to our local teams with boots on the ground, we are determined to get there first. Developing top-performing products, proven in more growing conditions than ever before. Pioneer. What's next happens here. Visit pioneer.com/Canada to learn more.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. It's now time for the top ag news stories of the day. This is brought to you by The Dirt Podcast, featuring down and dirty agronomic science and actionable crop management insights. The Dirt is the place to listen to industry experts break down the latest crop nutrition research and news. It is the podcast that helps farmers make better business decisions through actionable insights. Get ready for Season 3 of The Dirt, coming this spring. Let's get into the top ag news stories of the day here on this Monday. And first up, the 13th Ministerial Conference for the WTO in Abu Dhabi concluded without major agreements on key global trade issues. Last week on the show, we heard from Steve Verhoeven, former trade negotiator for Canada, and he talked about the low expectations for this meeting, so I don't think there's any sort of shocker here. Despite overtime sessions, no meaningful resolutions were reached on agricultural matters, fisheries, and other critical areas. The only significant accomplishment was the extension of a moratorium on tariffs for e-commerce data transmissions by 2 years. The Bank of Canada is expected to stay the course on interest rates this week and remain tight-lipped about the timing of future cuts, even as the pace of inflation has fallen back within the central bank's target range. Bay Street analysts see the bank keeping its policy rate at 5% on Wednesday for the fifth consecutive rate announcement after increasing borrowing costs 10 times in 2022 and the first half of 2023. The bank has been on hold since July, waiting for a sluggish economic activity to pull inflation back down to earth. Governor Tiff Macklem said at the last announcement in January that additional rate increases are now unlikely, an important shift after months of threatening further hikes. However, he avoided giving a timeline for rate cuts and said that he wouldn't consider easing monetary policy until core inflation measures, which strip out volatile price movements, show clear downward momentum. That story according to the Globe and Mail. And this is kind of the thought here. Just because you can cut rates, if you think that inflation's under control, and just because you can cut rates doesn't mean you necessarily should. And if you were looking at some of the betting lines on what central banks were going to do in 2024, it seemed like there would be a series of aggressive rate cuts, and that seems to be pushed aside very, very quickly here at the midpoint in Q1. Bayer's Roundup cancer trial ends in hung jury. Mistrial was declared. The trial involving Bayer in Delaware regarding allegations that its Roundup weed killer caused cancer concluded with a hung jury. Unable to reach a verdict, jurors deliberated for approximately 3 days before announcing their inability to agree on whether Anthony Cloud's non-Hodgkin's lymphoma resulted from exposure to Roundup manufactured by Bayer's Monsanto subsidiary, or I don't know if it's a subsidiary, but it's who Bayer had acquired. Consequently, Judge Vivian Mendelia declared a mistrial and dismissed the panel. Bayer, in response to the mistrial, emphasized the scientific consensus and regulatory assessments supporting the safety of Roundup, highlighting its victory in a separate Roundup trial in Arkansas. The company underscored its commitment to presenting cases based on robust scientific and regulatory evidence, indicating that the recent verdict reaffirms its approach. Poland wants EU sanctions on Russian and Belarusian ag products. Poland plans to ask the European Union to put sanctions on Russian and Belarusian agricultural products, Prime Minister Donald Tusk said. Poland has also demanded changes to regulations on Ukrainian grain moving across its borders amid farmer protests. And if you look at what happened, some of the protesting that happened in Poland on the weekend, that's very, very much tied to farmers being very upset about some of the impacts of that grain flowing in from places like Russia and Belarus, as well as Ukraine, and really killing some of the domestic prices and impacting the basis negatively for those farmers in Poland. Speaking of farmer protests, farmers mobilize worldwide against agricultural policies, exploring the root causes. A new paper written by Christopher Barrett, who's an agricultural economist. He suggests that farmers globally feel increasingly targeted by political measures. A recent edition of Flashpoints delves into the root causes of these protests, highlighting common grievances among farmers and exploring the influence of climate and trade policies on the transformation of global agriculture. And like you've heard me say on the show here over the past number of weeks, Not all of the protests are tied to the climate agenda. There is obviously, in some countries, more so than others, and it is a bit of an underpinning of the whole thing, but a lot of it does have to do also with farmers pushing back against trade and specifically imports of agricultural commodities. Wholesale beef market strengthens, so we've seen this continued ascent with gains of $1.08 for choice and $1.56 for select on Friday. While packer margins have improved amid the strengthening beef prices, they remain solidly in the red. As a result, packers will continue to manage tight market-ready cattle supplies by reducing kill hours, which should further support beef prices. Make sure if you missed the beef market update with Ann Wasco on Friday's show, make sure you go back and check it out at RealAgriculture.com. While we're in the proteins, the pork cutout surges. The pork cutout jumped $4.23 on Friday, fueled by $20.59 surge in primal belly prices. But all other cuts except loins also firmed. The pork cutout found support just above $90 last week, an area that, up until a couple weeks ago, acted as a solid price ceiling. So we definitely could, we really need to see some improvement in some of those pork prices, as it's been a real challenging number of months for the pork industry, to put that lightly. India to buy more soy oil and less palm oil. India is expected to buy larger volumes of soy oil in 2024, while purchases of palm oil are likely to decline, as negative refining margins for palm oil versus positive margins for soy oil have prompted a switch in recent weeks. So something to watch. At Commodity Classic last week, there was a number of people talking about there's a large amount of palm oil that has been imported into the U.S. that is impacting some of the market. So definitely something we want to follow up with some of the commodity analysts we talk to over the next number of weeks. On the sugar front, U.S. sugar supply crisis looms amid Mexican production decline. So as the U.S. faces a looming sugar supply crisis due to drought and mismanagement in Mexico, without swift government intervention, U.S. sugar importers say they may resort to high tariff imports to compensate for Mexico's lower production. Recent projections by USDA indicate a significant drop in Mexican sugar production for the upcoming fiscal year, exacerbating supply constraints. With limited options to raise the tariff rate quota for low-duty sugar imports, U.S. sugar users may be forced to rely on high tariff alternatives, driving domestic sugar prices higher. And we've talked about the rising cocoa prices. That has been the market to be in if you're on the long side. The ongoing challenges for chocolate consumers and farmers as the demand for chocolate surges and cocoa prices skyrocket. Consumers are facing the prospect of higher chocolate prices. Especially heading into Easter. Factors such as adverse weather, crop disease, and market speculation have driven cocoa prices to unprecedented levels, squeezing cocoa farmers in West Africa. Structural issues like climate change and underinvestment further exacerbate the situation, threatening the sustainability of cocoa production. Despite efforts by governments and industry players to protect farmers, challenges persist, including low farm gate prices, and deforestation continues. While consumers may see increased chocolate prices, farmers often fail to benefit from these hikes. The widening gap between cocoa demand and supply poses significant challenges for both small and large players in the chocolate industry, potentially leading to layoffs and reduced profitability, that according to Pro Farmer. If you have any feedback on today's show, we would love to hear from you. All you have to do is send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us across all the different social media platforms, and you are more than welcome to call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Tomorrow, Lindsay Smith will be back in this chair as the host of RealAg Radio. I'm off to Camrose on Tuesday to speak at CMN, who's having a big customer event in Camrose, Alberta. Looking forward to that. And on Wednesday, I'll be back hosting the show, but we'll be also speaking at the Alberta Sugar Beet Growers meeting, which is going to be a lot of fun. Speaking of sugar, some of the stuff we were talking about there with the U.S. and Mexico, so looking forward to that as well. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio, and we will chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.
Thanks for downloading this RealAg Radio podcast, brought to you by Focus Herbicide from FMC. Lentil and wheat growers get a clean start this spring with Focus Herbicide. Along with early burn-off and extended weed control, Focus herbicide provides excellent resistance management. See your local retailer today.